America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Welcome back to South Beach. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. It seems like the hurricane season doesn't stop for even the calendar. Here we are getting into almost the second week in November here now, and we're still dealing with the tropics, an unbelievable season. This is Eta, and if you think about the season, we looked at this today at the Weather Channel, we haven't had a landfalling system in Florida yet. We've had two close calls. We've had some impacts. Isaias, remember, came up the East Coast, and then we had the fringe effects of Sally in the Panhandle. But this one could make two landfalls. It's certainly going to go across the Keys tonight and tomorrow morning, and then it may hook around and come back towards Florida later in the week. That forecast is not etched in stone, but this one is definitely going to go across the Keys and to the north and east where we are. We're in that big slug of tropical moisture. Look at the radar right now. Look at the reds and oranges, and it's just coming right in at us. This rainfall could be more than an inch an hour. In the past hour, we've had about 2/3 of an inch at Miami International. Winds there have only gusted to about 30, but up the coast, we've had wind gusts over 50 miles an hour. As these squalls come in, we will see these gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour, and the big threat here inland is the flooding. Here's some video from Fort Lauderdale up in Broward County. Street flooding, the urban flooding issue. We're going to have probably some flash flood warnings issued throughout tonight and tomorrow across South Florida, including Miami Beach, the Lauderdale area up towards the Palm Beaches. So more of this, Mark Elliott, right on through this evening. And then by tomorrow morning, the brunt of Eta will be out of Miami and Fort Lauderdale, but we're still going to have that trail coming around on the south and east side, and we'll see how much more rain we get. But it's going to be a gnarly night here on South Beach. Good night to stay home and watch the Weather Channel.
Yeah, I'm sure we're cheering on that dry air that's been trying to wrap around the center because, gosh, it is just a slug of moisture that's pointed at South Florida, basically right at where Mike is standing. And I can show you what that looks like on the radar picture and really why it is so squally, where Mike has suggested that it's those squalls, right? Those heavier bursts of rain pushing that wind down to the surface and giving the real gusty conditions. But just for a moment, let's assume that feeder band, that kind of squally weather wrapping around our system doesn't move all that much. It's pointed right at Miami, right at South Beach, and there's not that much to move it from there as we go through the rest of the evening hours. So be ready for some constant rain and at times some very breezy conditions. When these kind of embedded thunderstorms work their way in as well, that will again push wind down to the surface. They also might have some embedded severe weather along with them. Can't rule out tornadoes tonight in South Florida either. You don't have to be in that kind of heaviest rain, though, to see some pretty gusty conditions across Florida. Yes, right now it is gusty in Miami, gusting to 26, but look at the West Palm area. West Palm Beach is gusting to 41 right now, and you're not in that kind of rain that is pointed at South Beach. Yes, it's raining, but it is not right near that core of our tropical storm, Eta, that's moving through. That's really headed towards the Keys. So what is going on in the Space Coast, at West Palm, or across to the West Coast into Naples, where it's gusting to near 40 miles per hour also? A lot of this is because of a pressure gradient, a squeeze play. So that's why we've got so much wind potential, 40 miles per hour or more through the Space Coast. Now, north of Tampa Bay, the National Weather Service there saying, yeah, we could have wind all the way up towards the Big Bend over time here. This is more, representative of the core coming through. But the rest of you are seeing this squeeze play. High pressure to the north, our low pressure from our storm, and Mike, everybody in between getting that onshore flow and very gusty conditions because of it.
Yeah, not fun. And it's been windy all week too, Mark, before Eta even arrived, right? Hey, hello to you in Key West. Love the watercolor. Absolutely fantastic. Turquoise waters, but look at the flags that are whipping in the wind here. Getting closer and closer to the Keys, and the Keys are likely going to be kind of ground zero for the worst of it, at least the winds, as we go through the remainder of the night. All right, Key West, let's break it down for you and show you what's likely to happen. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's right, 5 days in a row. We've got a straight, in essence. We've got temperatures in the 80s, thunderstorms and wind. Look at the winds. They stay windy all the way at least through Wednesday. Then they start to back off as we go later in the week. So there's a look at the current winds, gusting to 35 in Homestead, 31 in Okmulgee here. In Naples, our winds are gusting to 37 miles an hour. Fort Lauderdale, 35. And you take a look at the rain that's still to come. It is just an absolute downpour. Alligator Alley in South Florida, a lot of us here, 3 to 5 inches of rain is still to come, a little bit less the farther north you go as the system goes west and then maybe dives south a little bit, so that'll spare you, we think, in Central Florida, at least the worst of it. In Miami, our temperatures here remain in the mid-80s, but again, plenty of wind for the next several days, and even stays breezy as we go late in the week as the system gets farther and farther away from us. It doesn't really relax at all. The winds are going to still be there. Then you take a look at Tampa. Now what gets interesting is it could get nasty for us tomorrow and then get nastier late in the week as that system goes into the Gulf and then maybe curves back toward the west coast of Florida. Just a wild forecast altogether. Once you stick around, we're going to continue our live coverage of Tropical Storm Eta.
Yeah, we're following this system brushing with South Florida, so when we come back, we're going to bring you live coverage from the field. Stick with us.
Thanks for being with us here for special coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. I'm Mike Bettis with Storm Specialist Mark Elliott. We'll be with you tonight until 9 o'clock Eastern Time, and right now Eta inching closer and closer to the Florida Keys. I want to take you live to Big Pine Key and Key West, both there in the lower Keys, and a very windy day for us. Clouds overhead, plenty of rain still to come our way. Let's get you the very latest on what we know with Eta with Mark.
Yeah, and Mike, we're following this storm right now as it's going to be approaching the Florida Keys. We could have our first Florida landfall, which is almost shocking considering the number of storms we've gone through. We're up to Eta, for goodness sake, and we haven't had a Florida landfall. A couple of brushes with a couple of the other tropical systems thus far, but not officially a landfall. That might change later on tonight, although it's not going to happen anytime fast, right? The storm is moving right now off to the northwest, close to 14 miles per hour, but as it approaches the Keys, it's already going to be starting to slow down, and that's going to be the calling card over the next several days. Will we gain hurricane status as we approach the Keys? Can't rule it out. There's not a lot of signs of rapid intensification at this point. That is good, but many of the models do kind of ramp up intensification later down the line, near the Keys or maybe just past them once we're in that loop current and above the very warmest waters of the Gulf and the Caribbean. Until we get to that point, we're still looking at all this moisture rotating around our center. We've got bands of thunderstorms that are going to be pointed at southeast Florida tonight, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm. It is going to be a squally night, maybe some embedded thunderstorms. Can't rule out an isolated kind of spin-up tornado, fast-moving tropical-induced tornado. And even without that, pretty persistent winds, 35 to 45 miles per hour, at least in the gusts. Sustained winds 20 to 30, looking pretty likely, and reasonably constant rain. All that to say, it's not a very comfortable evening out there, and if you can just stay camped inside, that will help. I would not be surprised at all if we start getting some flash flood warnings being issued. You zoom in on the Fort Lauderdale area from Boca to the north side of Miami. Anywhere in yellow there is already suggesting over 3 inches of rain in the past 48 hours. Some of you over 5 inches of rain, and I just showed you those rain bands. They're not going anywhere, so get ready for those to stick around. More rain rather than less, and thus the likelihood of some flash flooding through tonight. Look at this path, too, over the next couple of days. Going right over that loop current, could gain hurricane status sometime tonight or into tomorrow, staying as a low-grade hurricane, Mike, all the way through Wednesday, and then maybe coming north towards the Big Bend or the Florida Panhandle, but it is still a maybe. This is going to be just looping around for a while.
It's a wild track from the beginning to the end, that's for sure. Mark, thank you. Let's get back to meteorologist Mike Seidel. He's in Miami Beach. Multiple alerts in effect there, Mike, including a storm surge watch. Can you update us on how the day's been today?
It's been pretty dry today. We've had some on and off showers, a few squalls, but now we're getting into the meat of it as expected. We mentioned last night here that it was going to be later Sunday into Monday morning, and right now it's raining at probably about a half an inch or so an hour, and you can see how the wind is blowing the palm trees. These winds are gusting about 30 to 35 miles an hour. We've had some higher gusts. In fact, I want to show you a video my compatriot meteorologist Chris Bruin shot earlier, about an hour or so ago up in Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, and at Port Everglades up on a tower. Now, this is not an official wind measurement because it's not 10 meters up, it's higher, but they gusted to 68 miles an hour way above the ground. But you can see the wind in the palm trees there. You go up A1A and it just has been dousing up there all afternoon. They've got that special weather statement all the way from Miami-Dade up through Broward and southern Palm Beach County. Some areas have had upwards of 5 inches of rain, and this right now is some pretty strong rainfall. Not getting the wind. We're thankful for that. We've had, I think, just a little bit of debris coming off the palm trees. Haven't seen any palm fronds come down, at least within eyesight, but we're going to see some of this. There's going to be some palm fronds down in the morning. I don't think there's going to be anything really more than this as far as structural damage. It's really all about the rain, and as far as the storm surge out here, we're thinking 2 to 4 feet, and again, that's above normally dry ground. High tide of concern is really going to be around 2 a.m. in the morning, and then maybe tomorrow afternoon around 2:30 or 2:45. So, Mike, we're in the thick of it now. A tropical storm could be the first landfalling named storm of the season here in Florida, and fortunately, it's not anything like we've seen for those poor folks over there in Louisiana along the Gulf Coast where they've had the major hurricanes come in.
Yeah, very rough season for them. Mike, thanks for the update. Our special coverage continues with Eta after this, making its closest approach to South Florida right now.
Look.
Thanks for staying with us as we track Tropical Storm Eta for you this evening. It's obviously been a troublemaker across Central America and now about to unload on Florida, we believe. Boy, it's been a strange track, and it's only about to get stranger, folks. I got to tell you. You take a look at where it formed in the Caribbean, then almost made a beeline, in essence, for Nicaragua and Honduras here, making landfall late last week, and then inundating numerous countries here, including Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala, with some really serious rain before eventually emerging back into the Caribbean again. An immense amount of rain fell here in some places. More than 30 inches of rain, unfortunately, and some of that water filling up some of the river beds here and then just flooding into neighborhoods. And look at the roof rescues taking place. This in Honduras, literally people being rescued by a jet ski on top of their roof. That's a roof, so the whole building is underwater. Heartbreaking images. These are homes in Honduras. 21 people, at least 21 people, unfortunately, have died here. Now, the largest death toll so far in Guatemala. Floodwaters also sending people rushing to higher ground, unfortunately, and helicopter rescues here. Numerous rescues like this of people on their rooftops, people stranded on buildings here. This is so dangerous, too. Look at this. Look at this helicopter, how it just kind of hovers at the rooftop. Amazing to see, but desperate situation for so many people. Now, the rain from Eta then triggering a massive mudslide in the mountains of Guatemala. The Army there says the slide buried an estimated 150 homes. Just so tragic to watch this all unfold, and not to mention all unfolding in the middle of a pandemic. You see the rescue workers here with the masks on. All right, so from there, where do we go with the track for Eta? Well, back east again, coming through the Caribbean, re-intensifying, then coming up through Cuba. You can see how they had a kind of an explosion of thunderstorms around the center again. So comes east, then goes north, and now starting to make a little bit of a push back to the north and west a little bit here. So it's gone kind of like this, and it's about to do it again. Now, today, Eta sweeping across Cuba, dumping some very heavy rain here. Look at the rushing water. It knocked out power in some locations, knocked down some huge trees, cars, buses that were knocked over. Cuban civil authorities there say 25,000 people have been evacuated from low-lying areas. All right, and then we take you to Marathon, this through the Keys. And taking a live look, it's been windy, it's been rainy. We've had a lot of really heavy rain up through the peninsula of Florida, but the Keys likely to get some of the stronger winds that come along with the core of Eta. So Eta has been a troublemaker so far. There's no question about it. And over the course of the next, say, 24 to 48 hours, we're going to see another shift in the track, Mark. So where's it headed to?
Yeah, and this part of the forecast, Mike, is probably in the best agreement. I think we have the most confidence in this over the next day to 2 days, that we're slowing down as we go across the Keys. This will be, thus, a landfall in Florida. It'll be in the Keys. So far the peninsula is going, and the Panhandle for that matter, kind of avoiding a tropical landfall. I don't know if we'll avoid that in the long term, but we seem to be at least in the short term. So this is the next 2 days using our best hurricane guidance, our hurricane-focused models, our tropical models. That's each one of these different yellow lines is a different version of those models. And then this red splotch is the forecast cone as issued by the National Hurricane Center. So a lot of agreement in the next couple of days that we're going to come across the Keys and start bending south again, believe it or not, as this low that's associated with Eta gets caught up with an upper level low and an upper level trough that's really dominating the western 2/3 of the Gulf of Mexico. So because of that proximity, we get shoved south just a little bit. These waters are really, really warm. This is right over the loop current where some of the real warm water, both from the Gulf and from the Caribbean, kind of meet up and then exit through the Gulf Stream through that Florida Strait. So because it's going over those very warm waters, and these are effectively heat engines, we have an opportunity for some strengthening. We also do want to say, however, that we're tangling with that upper level low, and we've got some shifting winds and some dry air because of that. So there's a limit as to how strong we're going to get over the next couple of days, but strengthening nonetheless is still in the forecast, potentially into hurricane status. It should have its own little envelope of moisture to kind of protect it, protect Eta from that dry air that is otherwise surrounding it by this point. And with high pressure off to the east and high pressure off to the west, there's not a lot of room to move. That's why over the next couple of days, we're slowing down and then kind of stalling out after that point. So let's take a look at one of our high-resolution models. This might not be exactly how this comes together, but it's not off the table either. This is a good idea of where we are at right now. Coming across the Keys, here's Monday morning, okay? We're now into the Gulf of Mexico, and you're like, okay, we're going to continue out towards the Gulf, and we're basically going to be able to move away and be done for now. Well, not so fast. That's when we lose the steering. And so this version of the model takes us all the way down towards the Cuba coastline, stalls out here through Tuesday, maybe even into Wednesday before we start moving from there. And we'll pick it up there, Mike, coming up as well to talk about just how slow this goes and where we go after that point.
Just so 2020, Mark. Thank you so much for that. Still to come, live coverage of Tropical Storm Eta, the system nearing South Florida. When we come back, we'll take you to Miami Beach. Meteorologist Mike Seidel is there.
Welcome.
Welcome back to South Beach. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel here on the Weather Channel. It's Eta. I know we're covering tropics here in mid-November. It's almost Thanksgiving. Good grief. And this one is a very strong tropical storm. It may become a minimal hurricane, but it really won't matter as far as the impacts. It's going to be the rain, the wind, maybe a few spin-ups, and some storm surge. Let me show you what it looks like right now here in South Florida, Miami Beach. We've got the wind. The rain is not coming down very hard right now. We've had squalls coming through the area. We've had wind gusts over 50 miles an hour, but the wind has knocked out some power. Right now, about 21,000 customers without power. They're all down here in the southeast part of the state, and about half of those 21,000, Mike, are either in Broward or here in Miami-Dade County, and I suspect those numbers will creep up a little bit through the evening and overnight.
Yeah, I suspect you're right as well, because those, those squalls are still coming on through. So that's Mike Seidel in South Florida for us tonight. We'll check back in with him in just a little bit. And again, he's kind of in between that burst of the rain, but there will be more rain at that. What we want to do is follow where this is going to be going in the longer term, right? If you've been following along with us here on the Weather Channel, you know it's coming through the Keys, going back over that loop current and into the eastern Gulf. But then what? That is the million-dollar question at this point, because we run away from our steering. We run away from the help to move this along. We've got high pressure off to the Atlantic. We've got high pressure in the southern and western side of the Gulf of Mexico. And so we're not going this way. We're not going this way. You might say, okay, well, then there's a window off to the northern Gulf, and I think there is over time, but there's just nothing to push it that way, right? We've got a big ridge in our jet stream at this point, and so when you're stuck underneath that ridge, there's just nothing coming down the pike to move this along. Eventually, this jet stream does get a little bit closer in. We'll start to feel a northerly tug on Eta again, should transition from hurricane to tropical storm as that northward motion begins. But all that kind of tropical DNA is still going to be with us. We're going to have a large slog of tropical moisture across Florida and across the southeast states. What that tells us is that it's going to be raining for a while. Look at this pattern. Look at this slow motion. Not only the National Hurricane Center cone looking like a giant blob, but a squashed spider of tropical models in this point, where you could go into the central Gulf. You could just meander here and dance around for a few days. Some of the models finally pick this up and go across, say, the Big Bend. Others in our tropical suite come towards, say, the Panhandle or even the northern side of the Big Bend of Florida. And this is a telling graphic as well. This is the European ensemble, all the different versions of that European model, and each one of those circles on the map is a point where the model ends in 10 days. 10 days, we may still be somewhere in the northern or central Gulf of Mexico watching what's left from Eta. Quickly, Mike, this is what one of those models looks like. The European operational run brings us down towards Cuba, turns around, comes up through the eastern Gulf. This is now Wednesday into Thursday, then finally making landfall by the end of the week. We might be talking about this for a week plus here on the Weather Channel.
Thanks, Mark, I think.
You're welcome.
Goodness, right? Yeah, it seems like every storm has been a talker this year for sure. You want a talker? How about that? What a great sunset we have in Raleigh, North Carolina this evening. Boy, it's been a nice day for you. Temperatures in the 70s. Only getting hotter from here, by the way. Amazing where the temperatures have been of late, and it is shorts and t-shirts weather all over again. Hard to believe we're going into the second week of November. Look at tomorrow. Look at Tuesday, I should say, in Raleigh. A 79. You'll do mid-70s tomorrow, 79 on Tuesday. Then we stay in the 70s through Thursday. Could we then bring in some rain finally as the next system rolls in and cool your temperature off a little bit? It's still going to be above average, but you're cooling off to 68 degrees. Isn't that something? All right, so there's, as we go late in the week, you can have a really warm, moist. Boy, that was a terrible arrow, Bettis. Let's do this. We've got a lot of moisture pulling in from the north here. Warm, humid air on the backside. A little bit cooler air, drier air. That's what a front does for you here. And so the rain total forecast, especially if we have some influence here from Eta, could be tough. You just do some spots here in the Carolinas where it's 3 to 5 inches of rain. A lot of these places don't really need a lot of rain. You can see that we're already very wet here. This is the soil moisture where it's green, it's wet, where it's brown, it's dry, where it's the gray map color, it's pretty much on par. But there are plenty of places here we don't want to see the rain, especially in the mountainous areas there in upstate South Carolina through North Carolina or mountainous Virginia. There's Tuesday's forecast. Plenty of rain for you along I-75, 65, 55. 10, 20, and 40. Then look at the Wednesday showers go all the way into the northeast here along that front. Going to Thursday, trying to push it even more east, but plenty of spots here along I-85 and I-95 looking for rain. When we come back, we've got live team coverage from the Sunshine State as Tropical Storm Eta approaches South Florida in the hours ahead. So I want you to stick with us here for continuing coverage now through the evening and returning in tomorrow morning for you. An in-depth on where this goes through the week. We'll be back right after this. Tropical Storm Eta bearing down on the Florida Keys tonight. Bands of gusty winds, heavy rain already affecting much of South Florida. We have live team coverage, including a very erratic future track to watch in the days and maybe even week ahead. Hi, everyone. Welcome into our special extended coverage. I'm Mike Bettis. We have storm specialist Mark Elliott with us and live reports from Miami Beach with meteorologist Mike Seidel. Let's get to Mark first with the very latest on Eta as it gets closer and closer to the Keys tonight, Mark.
Yeah, you know, each time you say that with maybe a week, I just kind of take a big breath. Like, oh, here we go.
Tough week.
Right? Gosh, this is just, I keep thinking we've reached peak 2020. And then I'm not quite sure we have because we get another crazy scenario here with a tropical storm, right? It's not the strongest tropical system of the season. Thank goodness for that. But to think about tracking this so close to land for a week to 10 days, bringing persistent impacts, even, you know, indirect impacts across Florida, across portions of the Gulf Coast, maybe some indirect impacts for the southeast coast in the form of waves and rip currents. Nobody wants to be dealing with that as we get ever closer to Thanksgiving. But alas, that's the hand we've been dealt. So let's go through what's going on right now with this storm. And again, the latest update from the National Hurricane Center shows us this tropical storm, 65 miles per hour, Tropical Storm Eta, moving through the Florida Straits at this point. We're north of Cuba, moving northwest at about 14, headed generally towards the Keys, where the conditions will go downhill tonight. You're already seeing rounds of rain. There could be some extra wind coming up as well, as that center comes through. It's certainly not the only spot that's seeing the wind, though. We've got a squeeze play going on, an onshore flow for all of Florida. So just about the entire Florida peninsula is seeing wind. The southern half is seeing rain, thanks to this storm approaching. You look at some of the gusts, they're substantial. Fort Lauderdale right now gusting to 43. How about across Alligator Alley, Naples gusting to 32? And you don't even have to be in the heavy rain to be in the wind right now across Florida. Orlando gusting to near 30, Melbourne above 30, Tampa Bay starting to pick up your winds as well. National Weather Service office there starting to increase the probability of 40-mile-per-hour plus winds from Tampa Bay north all the way to the Big Bend. We're not done with this by any stretch. Now, I told you it's going to be a week or so. Look at this track as issued by the National Hurricane Center. Forecast to become a hurricane, bend south through the southern Gulf, basically stop, turn around, come up through the eastern Gulf as a strong tropical storm or low-grade hurricane. And honestly, this part of the forecast, very uncertain. More and more of the models are slowing this down and bringing it into the northern Gulf. So in the short term, hurricane watches or warnings, Mike, because of the slight chance that we increase to hurricane strength before this storm moves far away. Otherwise, widespread tropical storm watches and warnings are already in play.
All right, Mark, thank you for that. Let's update you on what we know right now with Tropical Storm Eta. A state of emergency has been declared for 8 counties in Florida, including Monroe County and the Florida Keys. And speaking of Monroe, several shelters open early today to provide refuge for people that want to get away from the impacts. In Miami-Dade, by the way, all bridges have been locked down there. Let's get you to Miami Beach tonight. Meteorologist Mike Seidel is there. We've had numerous squalls that have come through. Mike, update us on how the flooding is doing there and what issues we could potentially see along the coastline.
Well, certainly we've got some localized urban flooding, especially to our north up in Broward County. Take a look at the radar. You can see the congealing of all the rain and thunderstorms. They've had a lot of rain up there, upwards of 5 to 6 inches. Notice how everything's rotating around the center. The center now is going to head across probably around the middle Keys overnight. But rain wraps in, but it's, you know, it's not very organized. It's kind of asymmetric. And so you've got a band here, you got a band here, but we don't have a solid core and a big eye wall. So, you know, where we get the really horrible weather for 2 or 3 hours like we've seen so many times this season, that's kind of a good thing. We'll space these squalls out and hopefully cut down on the risk of flooding, or at least, you know, we don't have continuous flooding. Mike, you asked about the beaches. We've got the beach issues that we always see with a situation like this. The rip currents. everybody's going to go in the water anyway. It's just not one of those great beach days. Same with Monday and Tuesday. Also, there will be some beach erosion, and there's a surge potential of upwards of 2 to 4 feet above normally dry ground. Not expecting any major issues. By the way, Miami-Dade is still in the hurricane watch. They lifted the watch from here north. Broward County north, so there's just tropical storm warnings up the coast. Let me show you Chris Bruin's video from earlier. He shot this about an hour or so ago before it got dark up in Fort Lauderdale, mentioning Broward County, and just unrelenting downpours and wind gusts up there over 50 miles an hour. The airport, Mark Elliott just mentioned 43. Miami International, just off to our west, has gusted to 39. We picked up another 2/3 of an inch of rain. And with all the rain they've had and the issues they have with, the king tides and being so close to sea level, the mayor talked to us earlier today. They are ready for Eta, whatever it throws at them.
The city has portable pumps that have been deployed in several locations throughout the city. As you all know, through Miami Forever, we're building out our pumping infrastructure. But one of the things that we've done is created a portable pumping capacity so that we can make sure that our city remains as dry as possible throughout events that are likely to be a flooding event, such as Tropical Storm Eta, which may become Hurricane Eta in the next few hours.
Okay, so the wind roaring down the streets here in South Beach. Right now, a bit of a break from the rainfall. It is raining lightly, but I tell you, Mike, when it rains hard here, it's like the visibility just comes down when you get those tropical downpours blowing sideways. So we've got more of those coming in. The flood watch continues till Tuesday, but the real meat of the impacts from Eta will be between now and early on Monday morning. Mike?
Yeah, it was a lot different. When you were in those squalls, Mike, it really was really coming down. Appreciate the report this evening. There's plenty more to come. Don't worry, folks. It's just begun. Well, let's head farther south. Let's go to the Upper Keys here. Meteorologist Jen Carfagno is in Key Largo with a glimpse of what we can expect in that area as Eta inches closer.
Tropical storm Eta will approach the Florida Keys overnight tonight. Now, it's lost a lot of its intensity through the afternoon in terms of its appearance on satellite, but the winds have stayed strong with a core of 65 miles per hour as it approaches the Keys with this very large wind field extending 175 miles out from the center of circulation. We will be in the tropical storm force conditions getting worse through the overnight. There's certainly been a lot of precautions taken. The bus service ended in Key West earlier today. There are some evacuations, RVs and campgrounds. Visitors are evacuated from that. Mobile home evacuations as well. And boats are getting into safe harbor. We can actually see some of the boats out here that are anchored down to ride out the storm. This is a very safe part of the bay here. I'm on the bay side, the western side of Key Largo, and this is a good spot for them to ride out the storm. They're also all pointed right towards the wind because we are going to be on the dirty side or the eastern side of the storm, getting into those tropical storm force conditions, all coming at us from the east here pretty much throughout the night, ramping up as the overnight goes on. So here in Florida, we have actually not seen a landfall yet this season in 2020, despite what an active season it has been. Eta may be that Florida landfall right here in the Keys.
All right, Jen, thank you so much. All right, let's break down a little bit more details of this system with Mark. Mark, a lot of times we're relying on these models. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they diverge, but getting into the Gulf of Mexico at this point seems very, very likely. But what it may do, day 4, 5, 6 is a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, I think because we basically lose the steering, we lose the big players in the environment to move this along. And when something like that happens, the models historically don't do very well because they don't know what to key in on. They're losing those big players, and so Eta's going to just kind of meander. And a lot of possibilities open up when that type of weather picture begins. So what we can do is show you what we have right now, and that'll go a long way to explain this. We've got this big curl of dry air coming through the Gulf of Mexico and almost all the way into our tropical storm. You could make the argument that this isn't really looking all that tropical, maybe subtropical at this point, but with a bit of a core of a tropical system still remaining right in here. You notice the big blow up of bright greens on there, the big tall thunderstorms and kind of organized convection, organized rainfall kind of bubble. That has collapsed as well. So not looking very healthy, and that is good news, being that it is right on our doorstep. It's kind of the exception this year. All the other storms seem to be intensifying all the way right up to landfall. This one seems to be doing something a little bit different, and thank goodness for that. After this point, though, after this dry air starts really wrapping in and cutting off some of the rest of the access to that kind of deep tropical moisture from the southern Caribbean, well, we're left with this kind of ball of a tropical system of what's left into the Gulf of Mexico. It's at this point that we've got high pressure off to the east, we've got high pressure off to the west, and we just don't have anything to move Eta along. So we're gonna, you remember the Family Circus cartoon where the little kid like just walks around and jumps on stuff and moves north, moves south? That's what we're gonna have here with Eta. It's just not an easy setup to move along. Instead, we're gonna be watching the eastern Gulf until maybe the end of next week when this approaching jet comes in and we go from hurricane to tropical storm and then hopefully out and away. It's not a guarantee. Look at some of these tropical models, and it takes a week to 10 days just to come out of the southern Gulf, through the eastern Gulf, and hopefully away at that point. But Mike, it's still a hopefully. Many of the models take, again, through next week or maybe the end of next weekend before that occurs. You
know what's interesting is that west coast of Florida is the one spot in the country that's remained unscathed so far in 2020, but it may not last, right? That's a look at Fort Lauderdale. It is just pouring on us right now. We've got hurricane and flood watches in effect, rip current risk. It's going to remain through at least Wednesday. Coastal flood issues could be a concern as well. So all kinds of problems for us right now, not to mention severe weather as well. Oftentimes it's the right front quadrant of the storm that provides the severe weather, and we think we've got a torque count of 3 across South Florida in the upper Keys here. Low chance of tornadoes, but doesn't mean it's 0. Right front quadrant, usually it's right in here. It's this quadrant right here. That's where you're going to have the most dynamics in the atmosphere to produce severe weather. And so as the system rotates on through, that right front quadrant will rotate through South Florida. That's what we had that area under the risk. All right, so I want to show you the ingredients in play here. A lot of times during severe season, the springtime, we're talking about wind shear across the plains in Tornado Alley. Well, let's show you here. So tornado ingredients, including a really strong wind that's coming in from the east right now across South Florida, all right? That's at the surface where we are, right? Let's go 5,000 feet up, though, and notice what direction the winds are coming in. More from the south or the southeast here, so we're getting some change in wind speed and direction with height. So we're getting some speed shear, we're getting some directional shear. And a lot of times if you have low-level wind shear, that can really take over the dynamics of the atmosphere and get spins to happen within some of these thunderstorms. So there's a look at where the low is going to sit for us tonight. There's Eta. A right front quadrant is going to be here, but as the system pushes in this direction, well, the right front quadrant moves in that direction as well. That's why a good chunk here of South Florida is going to get thunderstorms and maybe even tornadoes. They'll be embedded in bands like this, all right? And they'll be quick. A lot of times these things will spin down. They'll last for less than a minute. They've done their damage and they're gone. We've got a lot of population down here, so there are things to hit, unfortunately. Now you get over here, kind of right along I-75, you're coming across Alligator Alley here. There's not a lot there, and that would be good news, but then you get all the population here in southwest Florida that could be dealing with severe thunderstorms and maybe even tornadoes. Here we are, 6 o'clock in the morning, still dealing with some thunderstorms out there as the low now spins way over here in the Gulf of Mexico. Ultimately, be prepared for severe storms. Tomorrow, not as big a threat as the system moves farther away, but nonetheless, still an opportunity and something to keep an eye on. Mark, we also know that because of all that rain we're going to get, some streets, some neighborhoods could go underwater.
Yeah, there's a combination of rainfall flooding on the way and also an onshore flow and a bit of a storm surge flood risk as well. We've already seen too much water. Now, the Florida soils are pretty good at getting rid of this water, but they can be overwhelmed. And we saw that earlier in Miami where the streets were flooded and some of the big vehicles were getting through. You got the truck off in the distance. You got a couple of SUVs moving by, but not necessarily a good idea. You just don't know what's underneath that water. You don't know how the shape of the roads. So that, again, that combination of onshore flow and heavy rain means the rain can't flow into the Gulf or into the Atlantic at the same pace that it normally does, and you wind up with some road overwash because of the storm surge. So you put that all together, the Keys from Key Largo and down through Key West, storm surge warning, storm surge watch for that southwest coast of Florida. And this is, let's face it, going to be an onshore push for potentially days with this slow-moving track as we get this, circulation around our low. Be prepared for a fairly long duration surge event. Now, not the highest numbers because the winds aren't as strong as they can be with the tropical system, and yet still 2 to 4 feet. We consider anything over 3 feet a life-threatening surge. It's more than enough at that point to float a vehicle, to come through a first floor of your building, get underneath the doorways if you've got 2 to 3 feet of storm surge out there. So that's the kind of potential that we've got. It is also interesting, look up here, 2 to 3 feet Jacksonville to Daytona, because you're closer to that high pressure to the north, and the shape of the coastline helps out to kind of catch some of that water as well. And so some decently high storm surge numbers all the way to northeast Florida. I mentioned a long duration event. By Monday morning, our center will be exiting the Keys, and yet look at this onshore push still ongoing here into southeast Florida. So the Monday morning high tide as well as the Monday afternoon high tide could both feature onshore flow, higher surge values than you may otherwise see. There will also be a couple of different rounds of waves, one going up the East Coast, another big push of wave action into the Gulf as this tries to organize again, Mike.
So many different aspects of this to follow. Mark, thank you. When we come back, special coverage of Eta continues. It's making its closest approach to South Florida here tonight. What happens through the night? What will it be like when you wake up in the morning? And what about down the road? You'll find out next.
Get the information you need to stay safe every day right here on the Weather Channel.
And welcome back to Miami Beach, South Beach. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel, and this is the kind of thing that's going to come down tonight. These are palm fronds. They're kind of sharp. You got to be careful, but with gusts so far generally between 40 and 50, this is the kind of vegetation that comes off these trees. I'll just put that down over there, and hopefully we'll keep those at a minimum. But when I've covered tropical storms in areas where you have a lot of palm trees, the next morning you see these littering the streets, especially when you get gusts over 50 or 60 miles an hour. So with that said, it's more about a rain story here as far as the streets go. Let's take you right out. We've got a second camera. My producer, Steve Dresner, is out on Ocean Drive, which is just about a block from where I am. Another block from Collins Avenue. And rain right now, it's lightened up considerably. So we've got some puddles and the streets are wet, but we're not getting one of those squalls that we've seen come through here with a very heavy rainfall. Last hour, Miami International had 2/3 of an inch of rain. So break right now in the action. See on the radar how fragmented the rain is. We've got bands rotating in. The brunt of the rain right now is just to our north, North Miami-Dade. You get up towards the Golden Beach area, Hollandale, and then up into Boynton Beach, and then you get up into Palm Beach County. Those areas are getting pummeled with heavy rain, and it's kind of training in there. So right now, Mark, we're in kind of a dry spot, but it is going to rain again, certainly in the short term.
Well, actually, that you're in like the one dry spot, Mike, but yeah, you're right. It will be filling right back in. And you know what, as those bands come through, they mix the atmosphere up. There's pretty strong winds aloft, and so when those rain showers come through, especially the heavier rain showers, they will push that wind from aloft down. The raindrops actually help to transport that wind down towards the surface. It's oversimplifying it a little bit, but it'll work, right, to understand how it gets that much gustier as those winds come through. The combination of the squeeze play that we're seeing, and I'll talk about that in just a bit, and the tropical system coming in gives you a max wind potential graphic like this from the different National Weather Service offices. Near our core of our tropical storm that could be a hurricane as it especially exits the Keys, 74-mile-per-hour gusts not out of the question. North of there, from Miami to Naples and Alligator Alley, 60-mile-per-hour winds. Look at this huge corridor, though, of 40-mile-per-hour winds, including now as far north as, say, the Big Bend. We could see this expand even more so as we go through the week ahead. In our the forecast of Eta comes eventually near the northern Gulf. Eventually is the key word. Let's talk a little bit about why. Here's our core. That's where the strongest winds are. They're going to be coming in towards Key West, south of Miami. That's where the winds right now are gusting to near 30. West Palm gusting to near 40. Melbourne gusting to near 30 as well. You're seeing that much wind away from the storm because of this. High pressure, low pressure. That pressure gradient makes the wind. So everybody is seeing that onshore push for the eastern seaboard, and it is pretty dramatically strong across much of Florida and will continue to be so for the next several days. I mean, Mike, let's not forget this thing does it turn south, then eventually starts coming north again, and all that wind comes back with it. So we might get a brief break, but it's going to stay squally overall across the Sunshine State.
And it's been that way for more than a week now, too. Before Eta even arrived, it was pretty nasty weather for us in Florida. There's a look at Key West right now, 75 degrees. We've got a pretty good wind. We haven't had a ton of rain in Key West, and we could see the center of Eta maybe come even right over top of us. Winds today gusting as high as 37 miles an hour and likely get windier as we go through the night and at least the first half of your day tomorrow until the system starts to pull away. But take a look at Key West. Tomorrow, winds 35 to 40. Start to back off a little bit, just incrementally going through the week, but we stay unsettled with showers and stormy weather here with squally weather likely on the east side until the system just gets so far away that you're not going to see any influence from it. But how about the winds? They're intense. Homestead right now, 29, gusting to 43 miles an hour. Miami, 30. Fort Lauderdale, by the way, our gusts now at 43 miles per hour. And some of these bands that come through, that's when you see the winds start to pick up. In Naples, our wind gusts now at 32 miles an hour. Plenty of rain still to come for us here. That includes some spots here that could be maybe south of Miami, maybe down toward Homestead or the Upper Keys here. You could be looking at, roughly 4+ inches of rain, not to mention, boy, it is really soaked here along the East Coast. I think Fort Lauderdale and West Palm and Hollywood, these are all spots we'd love to just cut the storms off right now. It just isn't going to happen, unfortunately. For Miami, 5 days of stormy weather is still to come. Windy weather as well, especially the next couple of days. Still winds tomorrow, 30 to 35, 20 to 25 going into Tuesday. And how about Tampa? Now, your forecast is interesting, and Mark was talking about the track, but look at this. Tomorrow, we could have some winds that are 25 to 30. They may back off a little bit for midweek and then ramp back up for Thursday and Friday, as now Eta potentially could get a little bit closer to the west coast of Florida. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It could actually hit us in Tampa. We still have to determine that, but we're in and out of those nasty storms here the next few days, and the winds, we have to see what those will still do here, Mark. We don't know what the intensity of Eta will even be yet.
Yeah, so with all those unknowns, you better believe our coverage here is really just beginning. Still to come, we continue our live coverage of Tropical Storm Eta, this system brushing with South Florida and then meandering through the Gulf. So coming up, we're going to get more live reports from South Florida on its closest approach tonight and then determine where it goes from there.
Welcome back. This is our special coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. I'm Mike Bettis, Storm Specialist Mark Elliott joining us in just a second. We're going to be with you until 9 o'clock Eastern Time to keep you up to date, and our coverage going till 1 o'clock in the morning tonight. We've got a tropical storm out there about to hit the Florida Keys tonight, producing very heavy amounts of rain and very gusty winds in South Florida, and that's where we want to take you right now. Miami Beach is where meteorologist Mike Seidel is tonight. In and out of the squalls tonight, Mike, and when they come through, they can really be rough.
Yeah, they roar right through here. In fact, you hear the wind before the rain hits. You can just hear the wind increasing and the roar of the wind down the streets here in South Beach. And then the rain comes in. We've got a nice break right now. It's not raining at all. And in fact, the visibility's come up. I can see the tops of the high rises here in South Beach. But there's more rain to come. Look at the radar right now, and there's a lot of red and orange out there. The heavy rains continue, though, to really pound areas just up the coast. Northern Miami-Dade County into Broward County, that's Fort Lauderdale, up to Boynton Beach. Then you get into Palm Beach County and all the way up there towards the Palm Beaches. That is where the kind of a fire hose of water, moisture, tropical moisture has been coming in for the past several hours. We've had localized flash flooding. And we've had some street flooding here. Take a look at this video from high above Miami. We're not talking drone video, but you can see the streets that are flooded. And that's what happens when you get these squalls, because they'll drop a quick 3/4 to an inch of rain, and then they'll move on. That's the good thing that we're seeing tonight on the radar, at least where we are in this part of southeast Florida, is the fact that we're getting the squall and then we get a break. So the water gets a chance to drain off because the ground is very, very saturated. We've had 12 to 14 inches of rain before Eta back in October, and I can show you what I mean right here. I walk over here and it's it's just like a sponge. It's very water. We got about 2 or 3 inches of standing water, and so it really is like a sponge here in this part of the state. So more rain overnight. We've got the flood watch continues till Tuesday. What remains to be seen is once Eta, the circulation, moves through the Keys into the Gulf, how much of the trailing rain bands, the tail, how much of that comes back up into this area, Mark Elliott? Looking at the HRRR model, it doesn't look like it's going to be that prolific tomorrow afternoon here in South Florida. But
yeah,
that could change. The model's not perfect.
Sure.
But, that would be what we would look forward. That's what we would see after we get the core of the system through the Keys by mid-morning tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it really does. It'll be determined by how much of that dry air from the central Gulf is able to kind of wrap around the south side of Eta and come through South Florida as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. Once again, some of the high-resolution models, as Mike was suggesting, kind of clear out South Florida. A couple of them are still going strong, at least in the morning. There could still at least be a bit of that rain still coming in southeast to northwest across South Florida. If you're right under that, it could easily lead to some flooding. Want to get you up to speed on what's happening right now with Tropical Storm Eta. 65-mile-per-hour winds, movement northwest at 14 miles per hour. That will be slowing down in a big way. I don't think slowing down even covers it because it's just going to be crawling. Want to show you this view first because we've got these embedded thunderstorms in a couple of these bands. Some of those could be quite strong, maybe even some embedded tornado circulations. Nothing right on the southeast Florida coast yet with regards to those kind of spin-up tornado potential spin-up circulations, but it is something that we'll watch as we go through the rest of this evening. Right now, Fort Lauderdale, look at it, it's gusting to 43 underneath one of those rain bands coming through. Miami kind of in between the worst of the rain right now, a little pocket of drier air coming in, gusting to 30. The next one's loading up. It'll be there and your winds will come right back in. Look at how much rain has already fallen in the past couple of days. Those orange to red colors are suggesting 5 to 8 inches of rain already. And we're not done. We've got all night to go with regards to rainfall. That's why the potential for more flash flooding is still high across southeast Florida. And gosh, where we go from there is just about anybody's guess. We lose the steering currents. We lose the big players around the storm that's been moving this and kind of guiding it. So instead, we just kind of meander through the eastern Gulf, Mike, for as much as a week right near hurricane strength.
It's amazing to look at all that, the history of it and then what the future of it could be. It's all over the place, right? When we come back, our special coverage of Storm Eta, Tropical Storm Eta resumes. It's going to make its closest approach to Florida tonight, likely slicing through the Florida Keys. We'll bring you everything you need to know about tonight, tomorrow, and the week straight ahead. All right, thanks for staying with us tonight. As we track Tropical Storm Eta for you, likely to hit the Florida Keys this evening, then reemerge back out into the Gulf of Mexico over time. Now, through the week, this is one to keep an eye on. Now, it's really been an interesting history when it comes to Tropical Storm Eta. Formed last week in the Caribbean, warm waters there, a low wind shear environment, and it exploded. And then as it made landfall in Nicaragua, it was a Category 4 hurricane. Intense wind, intense surge, a ton of rain over Honduras, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. And then eventually, by Friday, it came back out over the Caribbean. It was still producing heavy amounts of rain here across Guatemala and Honduras in particular, but overall, some places had more than 30 inches of rain. Now, when you see that kind of number and you see these kind of images, truly heartbreaking. People up on the rooftops here being rescued by jet ski. Look at that, the water's all the way up to the roof line there. They can literally walk off the roof and onto a jet ski. That's how high the water is in Honduras. At least 21 people have died because of Eta. Now, the largest death toll, unfortunately, is in Guatemala. Floodwaters here also sending people rushing to higher ground into the rooftops. And how daring is this? Literally helicopters perched on rooftops here and getting people out of harm's way. They're just kind of hovering at the rooftop. Boy, this is really precarious, right? But dangerous times call for really drastic responses, and this is what we're seeing. The rain from Eta then triggering mudslides in the mountains of Guatemala as well. The Army there says a slide buried an estimated 150 homes. Really tragic to see how this has played out across Central America. But now we know it's been on the move. And since it hit Central America, it came back out into the Caribbean, moved back east again, and then re-intensified. Got stronger once again after becoming a tropical depression. Went from a Category 4 hurricane down to a depression. Back up now to a tropical storm. I know, are you confused yet? I mean, we use all kinds of different terminology for this, but ultimately what it means is it re-strengthened, okay? Came across Cuba today, now sitting in the Florida Straits and about to hit the Florida Keys through the night tonight. We know this morning that Eta, when it hit Cuba, knocked down some huge trees, caused some flooding there. Look at the raging waters here in Cuba. The Cuban civil authorities say about 25,000 people were evacuated from low-lying areas. You can see the vehicles that were swamped. Really tough stuff there. And now getting closer and closer to the Florida Keys. That's Key Largo right now, where we've had some showers that have come through here. A lot of the really heavy rain has actually been north loaded. A lot of it's on the north side and up through the peninsula of Florida, but it's been at times very windy, very rainy. And the center may come very close to Key Largo, or maybe even just slightly south of you, but that would put you maybe in the corridor of heavier wind and rain. All right, so that is where Eta has been. It's been a tragic history already. Mark, we've got a long way to go before this is all said and done. Maybe another week we'll be following this. Now back into the Gulf of Mexico through the week.
Yeah, and you know, the next couple of days, I think the track of Eta is pretty well baked in. We're starting that westward motion yet again, moving northwest right now, and eventually probably due west, which is why we might wind up just south of Key Largo. But my goodness, that would put South Florida in the right side of the storm, a lopsided storm that should still have a good bit of rainfall with it. So let's move this forward. Here's the next 2 days or so of motion, both with the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. That's that red area. So, and mind you, they call for a hurricane again as we exit the Keys, moving over some very warm waters. I think what will be really telling for that tonight is if we get a new blow-up of thunderstorms near the center, near the core. We don't have that right now. In fact, it's looking pretty disorganized, if I'm going to be honest. And so that's one thing we're watching for to see if we could still be on a strengthening trend. Right now, the easy money, the easy bet is saying not really looking like we're going to really ramp up in a big way, but it's not out of the question. In fact, tropical systems overnight tend to do a little bit better. So if we get a new blow up with thunderstorms, that would change our thinking. That said, look at this slow motion through all these models. So the next couple of days, kind of paralleling the Cuban coastline and even bending south a little bit closer to Cuba as we go through the next couple of days. At that point, we've got this little envelope of tropical moisture. What we don't have is a lot of other players nearby to be moving that tropical moisture. We've got high pressure off to the east, so can't go back out east through the Florida Straits in a way. We've got high pressure in the western Gulf, so we can't continue to move west. Instead, in between, we lose all our steering currents, and Eta is just going to be stalling out and kind of meandering around. Let's look at one model that shows us this, a high-resolution look at both the cloud cover and the spin, and also at what the radar could look like, and follow that center westward out of the Keys, starting to organize over those warm waters, bending south over time here towards the Cuba coastline. This is now Tuesday, overnight Monday into Tuesday morning. Look at this, hanging out, still organizing, coming north again, Tuesday into Wednesday. And that's a real slow motion. We could be following that for, I don't know, days, all the way through the end of the week. So this is a long duration event that we will be following. Because of that, our coverage is really just beginning. We're going to continue our live coverage of Tropical Storm Eta as it moves past South Florida and continues on through the eastern Gulf of Mexico over time.
You can't.
Hello everyone, Sunday night here in South Beach. It's Miami Beach, Florida. We're watching Eta. It's a tropical storm, a strong tropical storm, but it's not very well organized. We'll take a look at the radar. You can see what I'm talking about. You see the center of the circulation, right? Now that's heading right towards the Middle Keys. It's moving northwest. It'll be back in the Gulf of Mexico by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, rain is wrapping in. We've had a lot of issues with urban flooding, flash flooding up in parts of Broward County, northern Miami-Dade County. We've got that flood warning till 8:30. Reports of water 3/4 the way up car tires out there in Commercial Boulevard. So we've had anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of rain, local areas like Cooper City and Weston. This is mostly on the other side, the west side of 95 and certainly west of Federal Highway US 1. So there you go. That area is the prime area of concern tonight for staying off the roadways. In the meantime, more rain's on the way. You can see that on the radar. We've got these squalls coming in and they'll continue to roll in, and we'll see more wind and certainly rain, Mark, into the Keys as we get into later this evening and right on through tomorrow morning before the storm pulls out into the Gulf.
And Mike, the million-dollar question is, how long does that heavy rain continue across, say, the Keys or South Florida? How much of that tropical moisture is still dragged back across Florida as our storm hangs out in the eastern Gulf of Mexico? Largely dependent on how much dry air wraps around our storm and hangs out and kind of cuts off more of that moisture from the southern Caribbean to get brought north. We'll see, because this is going to be with us for a while. I want to talk a little bit about the long-term potential here for Eta to be hanging out in the eastern Gulf of Mexico for the next couple of days. There's nothing coming its way until a jet stream, the jet stream that's currently in the northern tier. Remember how hot it was today in, say, Chicago and Columbus? Well, that's a ridge. Our jet's in Canada. Eventually, late week, it gets closer to the Gulf, a new dip in the jet stream. So what could be a hurricane at that point transitions back to tropical storm, and we start feeling that tug to the north, likely steered back towards Florida again with whatever core of tropical moisture is still with us. What about South Florida at that point? Well, some of the models suggest we're back in the game. We're back in a south or southeast flow that will continue to bring more rain across South Florida, certainly more rains into North Florida if the core were to come directly into that area. Here's a look at the hurricane models, the tropical focus models, and the National Hurricane Center cone. What's important here is that there are equal chances anywhere in red for where the center will go. I also caution you that by day 5, a third of the time, the center's actually outside of that cone. And notice where the USGFS model goes all the way into the central Gulf before finally making that turn. That's not completely off the table either. Several of the European model ensemble members, different versions of the European, also go into the central Gulf. And it's even slower. These circles are basically 10 days from now. So in 2 days we get here, and then the next 5 to 7 just to get in towards the northern Gulf. Mike, this is a long duration event, and depending on how much of that moisture is still getting wrapped around and into the storm, it might be raining through Florida and the southeast through a large portion of that.
It's really tough to see what could happen to Florida over the course of the next few days and maybe even the week. Mark, thanks. Then we go into the southeast. Hello to you in Raleigh. Mix of moon and clouds tonight. You're at 66 degrees. Nice warm afternoon for you. It'll be warm again tomorrow in the mid-70s. And then we'll push close to 80 degrees by Tuesday and staying warm most of the week for you here. We'll have a cold front that slides in late in the week, but before that, warm, humid air comes in from the south. I mean, incredibly warm for this time of year. And then introducing more showers and storms back in by Wednesday. Friday, you'll see the front come through and temperatures cool off. Not by a lot. I mean, you're only going back into the upper 60s, which is still above average for you here, but you see where we're headed at least. So there's the flow. It's going to be out of the south for the next several days, in fact, before that front even gets here. Once that front slides through, then you'll see the air dry out a little bit. You'll have a wind shift. The temperatures drop off a little bit for you here. Our total rainfall forecast across the southeast before that front gets here could be 3 to 5 inches in some spots through the Carolinas, especially of concern could be here in the mountainous areas. That would be, a Boone and Asheville, upstate of South Carolina. So those are places where you're a little bit more prone to flooding than others. And we're pretty wet here as well. So we get more rain in these locations. It's not necessarily a good forecast. Walking you through this day by day. A Tuesday, rain on the increase now across the southeast, most prevalent down through Florida. But now on Wednesday, you're really starting to get the dynamics in play here, and rain that'll spread all the way up into the southeast. Wednesday and Thursday, the two big days for rain across the eastern seaboard. Stick with us. We're going to have live coverage from the Sunshine State when we come back as Tropical Storm Eta approaches Florida tonight. Plus, in depth on why we could be talking about Tropical Storm Eta and maybe Hurricane Eta all week. That when we come back.
Well,
Tropical Storm Eta bearing down on the Florida Keys tonight with bands of gusty winds, heavy rain already affecting much of South Florida. And we have live team coverage, including a very erratic future track to watch in the week ahead. Thanks for being with us tonight for our special coverage. I'm Mike Bettis, Storm Specialist Mark Elliott with us tonight to track its every move. And from Miami Beach, we have meteorologist Mike Seidel. Let's start with Mark. Mark, we have a new advisory.
We do. Latest update in from the National Hurricane Center, the 7 o'clock Eastern time. Now, if you're familiar with tropical seasons and when we get those updates, you might be saying it's an hour early. No, the clocks have changed. You're just not used to seeing tropical systems this time of year. And so we get those updates, this evening update at 7 o'clock. And here's that 7 o'clock advisory. 65-mile-per-hour winds, that has held steady. Movement northwest, still at 14. That is not a big change. No changes to the current advisories that have been issued with regards to watches and warnings. So overall, the thinking is pretty consistent and constant here. Things going along to script, which is what you would want if you're, say, an emergency manager, right? You don't want big changes because that means things are going wrong. Right now, we're watching this storm approaching the Keys. Now, what is interesting to me is that we don't have a big kind of core of thunderstorm action blowing up near that center. That is excellent news. Without that, we won't be able to kind of warm up and that center and lower the pressures. Hopefully, we don't see that overnight, although overnight is actually a favorable time for these storms to reorganize. It is still moving away from Cuba, and so there's a chance that we'll still get some more organization, and that's why the National Hurricane Center is still calling for a hurricane as it kind of moves through, or really when it just exits the Keys to the west side into the Gulf. Wanted to pull this up as well. This is the European ensemble track from the model runs earlier today, the morning runs. We'll get another one tonight. Important because what it can tell us, at least on the short term, is that we're tracking towards the northern side of the guidance envelope from the European model, which puts a little bit more credence, for example, into the lines that are on the north side of the guidance over the next, say, 12 to 24 hours. A new start point, right? It's a little bit farther north, and so that's important. It means that core of wind, whatever core is there near that center, will be going right through the Keys, and this kind of north and right side of the storm, north and east side of the storm, traditionally a little bit more action there, and so we have to watch South Florida because of that, and that has already begun. We're seeing this pretty good plume and conveyor belt of tropical moisture coming into South Florida right now, along with embedded thunderstorms. There certainly could be some isolated tornado warnings with those tonight. And Mike, look at Miami right now, gusting to 41 miles per hour in between some of the worst of the rain. So the potential is there for really squally weather as we go through the rest of the night.
All right, Mark, appreciate that update. Thank you. Here's what we know right now about Tropical Storm Eta. A state of emergency has been declared for 8 counties in Florida, including Monroe County and the Florida Keys. And speaking of Monroe, several shelters there have opened to provide refuge for people that need to protect themselves from the weather. And in Key West International Airport closing tonight at 9 p.m. All right, let's get you to meteorologist Mike Seidel. He is in Miami Beach for us tonight. Mike, squally weather for sure. It's going to stay windy for us through the night tonight, maybe most of the day tomorrow as well. Wanted to ask you about what might happen, with that east wind or southeast wind that we're getting along the east coast of Florida. What might that do with some coastal flooding? Do you think that'll be an issue at all?
It could be. High tide is at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, about 7 hours from now, 6 hours from now, and then again tomorrow afternoon. And once the center of Eta crosses the Keys and goes into the Gulf, we're still going to have onshore wind, Mike, south, southeast. So we're still going to have that push of water. So I still think water is going to be higher than it should be. We're in between the new moon and the full moon, so that doesn't give us any additional lift or increase in the water because of the astronomical angle. So we'll see how it shakes out. The forecast from the Hurricane Center is 2 to 4 feet of surge above normally high ground. There's not a whole lot of concern talking with the locals of a storm surge issue, but the water will be up certainly, and we saw that today with the surf out there. The other thing that we've been following is this rain, this fire hose of rain into Broward County. We can show you the video, and then we'll show you the radar, and look at how much water is covering this neighborhood. Most of this is out on the other side of 95, but we got Cooper City out there, out Commercial Boulevard, from Federal Highway over 95 in those areas, and it's just continuing to rain. Now on the radar you can see, looks like it's drying out a little bit of a drier patch coming in towards Fort Lauderdale and up towards the areas up towards Boynton Beach, but then again we've got more rain coming in after that. So we're not out of the woods certainly, but it's nice to see a bit of a break there in that part of Broward County. Right now in Miami Beach, it's dry. We've got more showers coming in where that wind is really rustling through the palm trees and the mangoes here on South Beach. So Mike, quite a bit of rain so far just north of us. That's where they have the issue with the urban flooding and the flash flooding. But right here where we're standing, just a few puddles right now left over from the earlier squalls.
That's Mike Seidel for us tonight in Miami Beach. Mike, thank you so much for the update there from South Florida. All right, let's get you caught up on what we know right now about the state of Florida preparing and bracing for the impact of Eta. Jared Moskowitz is the director for the Florida Division of Emergency Management, joins us now live. Jared, thanks for being with us. What are your plans here to tackle this tropical storm?
Sure. So, I mean, look, it's just like any other storm that we've dealt with here. We execute, the plannings that we've been doing year round in the years past. So, this is a little bit of a what we call a trashier storm in that it's an unorganized tropical storm. We're worried, obviously, about significant loss of power just by limbs falling on the power lines. South Florida has been inundated with water for the last month. And getting, somewhere between 10 and 15 inches of rain, a lot of these trees are just going to come down on power lines. So we're very concerned with that. So, we're ready to respond with food, water, and ice. We've helped, the local governments help open up their shelters with staff. We've also supplied rapid tests. So obviously we continue to mitigate against COVID-19 as we open up shelters, as we've been, executing on those plans since, March and April when we put those into place. We've been talking obviously to FPL, the power company. They got 10,000 crews are ready to go. 50,000 people had lost power throughout the day, already been restored. We have less than 1% of the people in a bunch of counties without power. So, we'll continue to monitor the situation. Obviously, there's going to be, significant flooding in some areas just due to the previous inundation and the amount of rain that we're going to get in a short period of time. And so, we'll monitor it and we'll continue to support local governments with generators or pumps, whatever they need.
Yeah, and Jared, you mentioned that it's a messy storm, right? It's not just one area that you're watching. With this squeeze play, high pressure to the north, low pressure near the Keys, how many of the communities and the mayors and the emergency managers in, say, northern and north central Florida are reaching out for any guidance, considering that their winds could be in that 40-mile-per-hour range as well?
Yeah, look, everyone's paying attention to this. Obviously we take every storm seriously, but compared to what we've dealt with here in the state of Florida, whether it's COVID-19, Michael, Irma, Matthew, Hermine, almost Dorian, we've had enough experience to deal with a tropical storm, both here and with our local emergency management directors. Obviously, in this storm, as it comes across the Keys, the folks in Monroe County, they're always the lowest point in the United States, so they always get battle with these sort of things. But as it comes across and gets into the Gulf of Mexico, obviously we're significantly concerned about the potential strengthening. I know a lot of the guidance doesn't show that, but we really want people to pay attention to this storm. The Gulf of Mexico has not been kind this year, seen a lot of intensification, and sometimes the models don't pick up on that. So we're really worried about Tampa Bay, Big Bend, the Panhandle area, if that storm strengthens and gets into that, Thursday, Friday.
Well, Jared, let me ask you about the west coast of Florida. We've been largely spared so far, this year. If this thing gets back into the Gulf of Mexico, re-intensifies, what are the challenges for a place with heavy population like Tampa, St. Pete?
Yeah, look, in the tied for most active hurricane seasons, Florida did not have a landfall. I thought that we were going to get through November, but obviously there are other plans. Looks like we're going to have a landfall up there. So look, obviously, we want to make sure that you know, if we can, that this hurricane stays away from the areas that are still obviously recovering from Hurricane Michael, and most importantly, right now, the areas recovering from Hurricane Sally. So, you know, obviously, we don't want it to hit our vulnerable areas that are still recovering from previous hurricanes. You know, we don't want it to go anywhere, quite frankly. But I don't think this is going to dissipate in the Gulf of Mexico. Hopefully, we don't see that intensification. Hopefully, it doesn't hit, you know, great population centers. But, you know, it looks like Florida is going to be dealing with a double impact in the next week.
All right, Jared, always good to talk to you. Thanks for making the time tonight. Thanks for the information. Best of luck there in Florida. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't have to talk to you in the future. But I know you'll be there. Appreciate that. Hey, let's talk a little bit more, Mark, about what we were just talking about with Jared there. The model breakdown here, where this could go after it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. How intense could it get? And what's steering it at this point? And which parts of Florida? I mean, Jared was talking a little bit maybe about the Panhandle. We're talking maybe a little bit more about the west coast of Florida. What are your thoughts right now?
Yeah, what's steering it now and what won't be steering it over the next couple of days? Because this thing enters the eastern Gulf and just hits the brakes. Right now, we've got this trough, right? This dry air that's carving its way into the storm. I think that's why we're not seeing any real good organization at the moment. As this kind of center of Eta and that ball of tropical moisture moves back westward and away from that digging trough, away from the influence of that kind of south side and the stronger winds aloft, that's the opportunity for some strengthening in the eastern Gulf. Will that dry air that surrounds it be a limiting factor, a mitigating factor? I think so to some degree, but that does not mean that we can't get back to hurricane status. In fact, that's the official forecast right now, calls for kind of low-grade hurricane for several days moving through the Gulf. Again, big players, east and west, high pressure, can't go in those directions, and thus we just slowly drift north over the next couple of days. That opens up an opportunity from, say, Tampa Bay through the Big Bend and across the Florida Panhandle, arguably as far west as Louisiana, needs to at least have some sort of, eye towards this storm, just in case this starts getting ramped up and moves a little bit farther west. Some of the models suggest that. The best ones are suggesting we go from hurricane to tropical storm and then get pulled north because of that trough. And at that point, it could be a really lopsided storm with the bulk of the precip on the east side. So less chances of an impact in, say, New Orleans than there would be in Tampa or around the Big Bend, say, Tallahassee in the Panhandle. But that does not mean a zero chance. That's why we need you to continue to pay attention. Here's a look at the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, and overlaid on that, all those yellow lines are different models, different tropical models. You can see even the USGFS model comes all the way to, basically even with New Orleans before finally making that turn. So it is something that we need to continue to watch. European model ensembles, different versions of the European, also support that. It's moving even slower on this. This is a 10-day track from where we are at here to where those kind of circles are at the end of the tracks. It could literally take 7 to 10 days until we're done with this thing. Speaking of the European model, here's one of those versions of the European. Comes south near Cuba, puts the brakes on, organizes, goes north really slowly. Look how lopsided it is. Dry air cutting off the west side, but look at all this rain that could be impacting the Tampa Bay area with a bit of a core of a system that still comes through the Panhandle. That could have its own core of wind as well, Mike. So we really do need to watch this in multiple spots of Florida for different reasons as it slowly moves through the Gulf.
As it's been all year long. Got to keep an eye on every single one of these. Mark, thank you. To Fort Lauderdale we go. At times very squally today. The winds have been gusty throughout the day. They've been quite intense the last couple of hours with some really heavy downpours that have come in as well. And we've actually got a severe weather threat as well. So I want to keep you up to date on what's happening with that risk, because we're getting just the right dynamics in the atmosphere to produce potentially even spin-ups of tornadoes. So torque count of 3 here in South Florida. That'll include Miami, Homestead, down through maybe a Key Largo here. Torque count 2, Fort Lauderdale, up toward Port St. Lucie here. Again, not high risk for tornadoes, but in some of these bands, you might actually get that. The right front quadrant, usually that hot spot for severe weather and tornadoes, that'd be this quadrant right here. And as the system moves off to the west, that right front quadrant will also move off to the west here. So basically South Florida, like we just showed you on the map there, is the spot to watch. You look at the ingredients, including wind shear in the atmosphere. And what wind shear is, it's a change in wind speed with height. Does the wind get more intense the higher up you go in the atmosphere? Does the wind change direction the higher you go up in the atmosphere? So are the winds at the surface, our winds at the surface are mostly out of the east, let's say tonight, all right? But then you go up about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere, and those are shaded in orange here. Those winds are generally coming out of the south or southeast, so the winds do increase with height. They increase intensity with height. They also turn with height. So now you're talking directional as well as speed shear in the atmosphere, and that could be enough to get some tornadoes to form here. They'll likely form in squall lines like these, and they'll be quick hitters. They'll spin up very, very quickly and probably last for seconds, maybe a minute, and then they'll be done. That's generally how they work. Not all of them, but some of them could last a little bit longer, maybe a bit more intense, but overall that's usually the trend. So a lot of these squall lines through the night tonight, and it's dangerous. It's nighttime. You know, a lot of us are sleeping. Have a way to be alerted if severe weather were to hit your area, whether it be the mobile alerts on your phone, weather radio. Those are all good options for you here. Still more storms, 3 o'clock in the morning, could extend up to maybe a West Palm. That's a really intense line right in there that comes in very early morning tomorrow, comes across Alligator Alley and could threaten us over toward Naples and Fort Myers as well. Maybe not as much of a threat tomorrow as the system's now going to start to sit over here and just pull a little bit farther away. Just distance-wise, we're farther away, and so maybe a little bit less chance for severe weather tomorrow. But plenty of rain, and so flash flooding still likely. That includes I-95 and down through the upper Keys here, likely flooding through at least tomorrow morning. When we come back here, our special team coverage of Eta resumes. It heads through the Florida Keys in the hours ahead. We take you back to South Florida for the very latest, and then take a look at the track through the week into the Gulf of Mexico.
You can't.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Welcome back to South Florida. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. We appreciate you tuning in. It is November, believe it or not, and we still have tropical weather. What a year for many reasons. Looking at the radar, you can see the spin. You can see the center of Eta. It's a tropical storm with 65-mile-an-hour sustained winds.
And apparently those winds just knocked out the signal to Mike Seidel. So we will get back to Mike Seidel when we reestablish that connection. That's the thing. You're broadcasting in the weather. Sometimes the weather can get in the way. Let's talk a little bit more about the winds, though, because we have a graphic here created by the different local National Weather Service offices. What you're looking at here, shaded in by color, is the worst case reasonable scenario. Not everyone, say, in the red here is going to see 74-mile-per-hour winds, but that is a reasonable possibility for the top of the wind threshold. And so that's why there's hurricane warnings that are up. The chance is there for hurricane conditions. In that corridor, Miami to Fort Lauderdale and across Alligator Alley over towards Naples, 60-mile-per-hour winds. Again, not everyone's going to see the 60-mile-per-hour winds. Some of you could, especially in the gusts. And I think what's going to be real telling over the next couple of days is this yellow area, the 40-mile-per-hour winds, really expanding north. There's a couple of good reasons for that. Even as our core is down here and moving this way and into the Gulf, there is high pressure off to the mid-Atlantic, eastern seaboard. That's creating a squeeze play in between. You've got a very strong east wind crashing into Florida. That is going to expand how kind of wide, how far our strong tropical storm type winds get. I think most of Florida is going to wind up with that kind of potential. Yes, it'll be worse near that core, although it's not exactly an eye wall, right? We don't have a true, strongest core of winds coming through, but there is a tropical system. There's a core of wind near that center. Also in these bands and the thunderstorms embedded within them, those will have very strong winds. So that's something you need to watch out for as well. In between the winds, look at this. West Palm, in between the rain, I should say, West Palm gusting to 43, Miami gusting to 41 right now. Those wind gusts are important. It's not the sustained winds that usually takes down the trees. It's the gust of wind on top of the saturated grounds that is the proverbial straw. That one tree that falls and lands on the power line, knocks you out of power for hours to days. You don't want that, okay? So we are watching those strong winds. And again, here's that squeeze play. High pressure to the north. Our tropical storm is a low pressure area. The pressure gradient, the difference in that pressure over that distance, that creates the wind. Wind will flow generally from high pressure to low pressure. And so in between here, we've got that strong east wind. How about where we go from here? Well, our low moves into the eastern portion of the Gulf of Mexico, and so what you see is a brief break, and then the low comes back, and so do the winds. So, Mike, a couple of different rounds of strong winds coming across Florida for the week ahead.
Just like last week. It was windy all week last week, and here we go again. I feel like the winds have picked up a little bit for us here in Key West. Those flags that you see kind of bottom center of your screen are really blowing right now. And the winds could potentially gust upwards of maybe 50 miles an hour tonight. But through the day tomorrow, a very breezy day. And we're likely to see some more rain that comes in. Now, a lot of the rain has been displaced up to the north, so up through the peninsula of Florida, not that much in the Keys. But look at this forecast tomorrow, probably the worst of the days as the system basically comes over top of you tonight and then lasts at least for the first half of the day tomorrow, if not a little bit longer than that. 82 degrees with thunderstorms in our forecast through the week, and the winds slowly begin to back off for us here. But the next 2 days in particular, I think, is when the worst of the weather will be there. Current winds right now in Miami gusting to 41, gusting to 45 in Fort Lauderdale. Even on the west coast of Florida, winds are gusting at about 30 miles an hour. Not to mention, we've got a solid amount of rain that is still to come. Listen, it was soaked in October. November has been really, really wet. And now we've got this to deal with. Now we've got a tropical system. Usually about this time, we're starting to, transition more to, our very comfortable winter weather. Listen, November is usually a great month of weather in South Florida, but look at this. 3 to 5 inches to come here, Alligator Alley, Miami points southbound here, so Upper Keys, that could be us. Homestead, that could be us. Then 2 to 3 a little bit north of there, so there could be a corridor. The models are cranking out a little bit more rain there from Fort Lauderdale back toward Belgrade here, so just something to keep an eye on. A localized flooding and high water in some intersections could be a possibility for you here. All right, Miami, let's break down that forecast for you. Tonight and tomorrow, very gusty winds with thunderstorms. Tomorrow, winds 30 to 35. Tuesday, a little bit breezy, but not as bad as tomorrow. And then gradually, the winds coming down, but still thunderstorms in our forecast with temperatures in the mid-80s for us here. So overall, a very disturbed weather pattern, Mark, with probably the worst for South Florida, at least the next 2 days or so.
And those grounds are soggy. They don't have a lot of bandwidth to soak up that rain that's still on the way. So a little bit goes a long way. We have to watch out for some flash flooding. Still to come, we continue our live coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. It is a brush with South Florida, could come right through the Keys, could be the first official landfall of a tropical system for this very busy 2020 tropical year. Live updates from South Florida, and we'll follow where it goes next as well.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back to our special coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. I'm Mike Bettis alongside Storm Specialist Mark Elliott with you till 9 o'clock tonight, and our coverage here on the Weather Channel continues live until 1 o'clock in the morning. Right now, Eta inching toward the Florida Keys. Let's take a live look at Big Pine Key and Key West this evening. Yes, the sun has set. It's getting dark. The winds are picking up, and at times it's gotten very, very squally for you today. And more of that to come, unfortunately. Let's bring in Mark, talk a little bit more detail about this. Mark, the worst of the weather tonight, you believe?
Yeah, it depends on where you are, right? Location, location, location. I mean, you're going to have a core of this tropical storm come through the Keys tonight, and yet right underneath that center, there's really not that much going on. So you might be out in the Keys going, what tropical weather? It's just a normal day. You get an hour of rain and then you clear out again. That's not totally out of the realm of possibility, although it will be a little bit breezier than your average evening and night across the Keys. And yet, look at this. Look at this conveyor belt of tropical rain that we have pointed towards southeast Florida. There is a potential that some of these embedded heavier bursts of rain could have some brief-lived tornadoes, could also have much higher rainfall rates on the order of 1, even 2 inch per hour rainfall rates. And if they just slowly drag their way through one community that already has saturated grounds, because let's face it, it's been raining in southeast Florida for, I don't know, weeks or months. At this point, it's been a really soggy pattern there. That could be a little bit too much, and we might wind up with some flash flooding. We're not there yet. I think we'll get there as the night goes on. And again, embedded within that line, those are thunderstorms. There are some pretty good rains coming in towards, say, northern Broward and maybe West Palm as well. So that's one area of concern for sure. Very heavy rain is already starting to come back in just north of Fort Lauderdale. Think maybe interior Boynton, Boca, and then eventually West Palm. And if you just kind of follow this in, it's going right into those same communities. If it's raining, if it's picking up right now, get ready. It's going to rain there through much of your night. Back down towards the core of our storm, it's not actually as bad. Marathon, north to south winds gusting to 25. In the north side of that, Miami gusting to 41, Fort Lauderdale gusting to 44. You feel the trend? You go north and away from that center and the winds could actually be a little bit worse. And that is the area that's seen the worst of the rain so far. There is some red kind of hidden behind the name Fort Lauderdale, suggesting over 8 inches of rain, Mike, in just the past 48 hours. Add a couple of, inch per hour rainfall hours into that, and suddenly it would not shock me at all if we wind up with some flooding.
And so let's check in on some of that flooding now. Meteorologist Mike Seidel is live for us in Miami Beach, where Mike, there could be numerous concerns here. Yeah, we could have some issues at the coastline. We've got rip currents, and we maybe have some coastal flooding. What are your thoughts on some of these big squalls that come through? How much flooding could we see?
Well, Mark mentioned the rainfall. I looked at the Fort Lauderdale airport, the official observation. They've now had just over 6 inches of rain today. Well, what caught my eye, get this, they've now had about 85 inches of rain so far this year. 85 inches, they're way above average, but it's not the wettest year on record to date. I don't remember the year, but it was 97 inches. So I was thinking, are they going to hit 100? They may hit 100 inches of rain, but it has been very, very wet. And we'll go back to the radar because this is really the story here in South Florida, along with a wind gust 40 to 50 miles an hour. So far, 32,000 customers without power in this part of the state, and about 22,000 of those are either here in Miami-Dade or up the coast in Broward County. Mark mentioned the rain coming back in towards Lauderdale. The heaviest rain now north from Pompano up Federal Highway into Boynton Beach, and then up towards the Palm Beaches. We're still nice break here in South Beach in Miami. Notice there's nothing on the radar right now, but there's plenty of squalls off the coast. But notice it's not solid. That's why we're getting this nice break, which really gives us a chance to drain off because the ground is so saturated. That has not been the case as we have seen parts of Broward County where we've had 6 to 8 inches of rain and reports of water 3/4 of the way up tires. Let me show you some of the rainfall and some of the flooding here in the Miami Beach area. This was shot earlier. And the standing water, the ponding on the highways, and that's what we've been seeing through the area with the big squalls. Mike?
All right, Mike, appreciate the update. Thanks so much. And when we come back here on Weather Underground, our coverage continues for you. This is the system Eta is going to make its closest approach to South Florida tonight. Heavy rain in South Florida. The center likely to come over the Keys. More when we come back. We are tracking Tropical Storm Eta for you tonight. This thing has had history since last week of really overproducing, and we're hoping it doesn't do that again. But I want to go back to where it all began. And this was early last week when it became a tropical storm and then eventually became a hurricane and rolled its way through the Caribbean right before landfall, got all the way up to a Category 4 hurricane, then made landfall in Nicaragua. It was a really intense storm with storm surge, torrential rain, produced winds that were roughly 140 to 150 miles an hour in Nicaragua here. Then racing its way from Nicaragua, not even racing its way, just kind of meandering its way from Nicaragua in through Honduras, all along the way producing torrential rain, reducing in intensity, getting all the way down to a tropical depression, then coming back out over the Caribbean, in some places producing more than 30 inches of rain with devastating consequences. A ton of rain here, but a ton of rain down through Nicaragua, as well as really heavy rain in the mountain areas of Guatemala, Belize as well. Certainly it's one thing to see these rain totals on the graphic, but then you see some of the images as well. Floodwaters here reaching the roofs of some homes here in Honduras. Literally people being rescued off their roofs by jet skis. That's how high the water was. We know at least 21 people have died in Honduras as a result of Eta. The largest death toll, unfortunately, is in Guatemala. Floodwaters here also sending people to higher ground and to their rooftops. Numerous harrowing rescues like this. Look at this chopper, literally just kind of teetering on the roof here, hovering. This is so dangerous, but getting these people out of harm's way has been the priority. Now the rain from Eta triggering big mudslides in central mountains of Guatemala as well. And doing a little prayer here as they believe as many as 150 homes were buried under mud, and search and rescue ongoing. The track obviously has been an odd one, going east to west through Central America, recurving, coming back east again, intensifying over the Caribbean, and then coming up toward Cuba. So coming up toward Cuba, regained tropical storm strength here from Cuba going back now into the Florida Straits. So now sitting right about here and producing some very heavy rain across Florida for us tonight, especially across South Florida. But we've also had some bands over here through the Caribbean, including some really heavy rain through Puerto Rico, numerous areas under flash flood warnings. And we have some new video into the Weather Channel to show you the scope of some of that flooding. That's a look at it here. And then now as night has fallen, you can see the high water in the neighborhoods here. Unfortunately, this may go on for several hours here, especially when these bands set up right over top of you, which is what they've done. They produce rainfall rates in excess of an inch an hour in some locations here. But ultimately, now making its way closer to Florida. A heavy population center there in South Florida from the Keys up through Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm. That's Key Largo for you right there. We don't think that storm surge is going to be a huge concern for you here, but we do think that the possibility of some flooding, rain, maybe some sporadic power outages here with a few brief gusty winds. So just something to keep an eye on as we go through the rest of the evening and at least half of your day tomorrow. All right, so let's take a closer look here at South Florida and the Keys. Mark, you know, you look at where that center is. I mean, you see it clear as day on the radar, and I think one thing that's interesting is everything is north loaded at this point.
Very much so. Or you could say way southeast loaded, because this thing is so stretched out, right? You can even make the argument that this isn't even a fully tropical system. I think there is a tropical core still, but it is embedded within a much larger system that you can see here on the water vapor loop. So this is where our core of a tropical system is still hanging out. All of this is not really fully tropical by any stretch. It's tropical moisture, but it is tied to that big trough coming across the Gulf. Bad news for Puerto Rico. We just showed you that video from Puerto Rico. Look at this, new blow up of thunderstorms just to your west. That's going to drag across the islands of the northern Caribbean, including Puerto Rico. That means more heavy rain is headed there. So the flooding's already begun there. Most of our U.S. flood warnings right now are actually in Puerto Rico, and thus got to watch out for that next batch of rain coming through. How about closer to, say, Florida? We know that our storm over the next 12 hours is going to come across the Keys and then bend south again, believe it or not, through the southern Gulf of Mexico. In that exact location is the loop current, the rotation of the water that moves out of the Gulf of Mexico, and a little piece that actually comes up from the Caribbean Sea, and then the exit point is through the Florida Straits. That is some of the warmest water where that loop current connects up to the Gulf Stream that we have. And so it's going to be moving over reasonably warm conditions, some shear, some dry air nearby. There's some headwinds, don't let me get you wrong here, but because of that warm water and because of at least some favorable conditions, we could get back to hurricane status as we go over and just west of the Keys. That kind of pocket of tropical moisture then gets stuck there. There's high pressure on either side. There's not a lot of atmospheric help to move this along. And so we're just going to be following that swirl for the next several days. Here it comes through the western side of the Keys, then kind of bending south, back down towards Cuba, stopping, coming back north Tuesday to Wednesday. Mike, we could be following this all the way through the week until it finally gets out of the Gulf of Mexico.
Amazing how long we could be tracking this thing. Mark, thanks. Still to come here on the show tonight. Our continued coverage of Tropical Storm Eta. It's now about to push its way through the Keys tonight. How much wind and water will it bring? We take a detailed look when we come back.
Welcome back to South Beach here. We've got power outages mounting now over 30,000, and most of those are in Broward and here in Miami-Dade County because of the winds. We've had gusts over 40 miles an hour. In fact, in the past hour, Lauderdale's gusted to 45. Miami's gusted in the low 40s, and we may see higher gusts. In fact, let's go to the radar. We have a special marine warning, but this cell is coming right in towards Biscayne Bay, which is just south of here, and it could produce some water spouts. It's moving west at about 45 miles an hour, so it's trucking pretty good. So those areas south of Miami Beach, Biscayne Bay, and those areas inland, watch out for some very heavy rain, gusty winds, and some of those, and if there's a water spout, it could come on land as usually a typical weak tornado. More storms and rain overnight tonight as Eta crosses the Keys and goes into the Gulf of Mexico. What was that? Oh, we just dropped another palm frond. Let me go over here and grab this one. Now this is a pretty big one. Got to be careful with some of these, but we heard it come down. So this is a kind of cleanup they're going to have tomorrow here in South Florida. In fact, the winds tomorrow are still going to be rather gusty, but this just came down. It's not very heavy, but it did make a nice noise. So, Mark Elliott, there you go. Little debris down here on South Beach from these gusty winds from Eta.
And you can understand if that happened to be right above a power line that you could get some power arcing, maybe some power outages.
Right.
That is the risk tonight, Mike, as these kind of squally conditions come through. The big question after that is, where does this go? And the answer is almost nowhere. Unfortunately, for those of you that are hoping to have a fast goodbye to Eta, that is not in the cards. The big steering currents that we've been following has been this trough of low pressure. Remember, that's what picked this up from Central America, kicked it off towards the north and east and towards Cuba and now towards Florida. By the time we get into tomorrow morning, it's exiting the Keys and moving into the eastern Gulf. By that point, it's left behind by that trough. It's kind of underneath the trough, if you will, and but in any case, not getting steered by it anymore. High pressure is going to be off to the east, high pressure off to the west. No good steering flow for this at all. So it's going to meander around the Gulf eventually late next week, late in this week coming up. The jet stream gets a little bit closer into the Gulf again. That then gives us a new northerly jog. Hurricane changes to tropical storm and likely pulls this thing back towards Florida. So Florida, you could be dealing with this again in portions of your state towards, say, Wednesday, Thursday, or even Friday. And all that tropical moisture remains in place across Florida for a long time. Here's a look at the forecast cone, as meandering as it is, as well as some of the tropical models, which are even more so. New run of the USGFS just came in. Look at this. It never gets picked up by that next front. It's still hanging out in the Gulf for a while. And some of the European model ensembles do that also. Can show you the latest run of the European model. It takes our storm out of the Keys, organizes it near Cuba again, starts to move north through the eastern Gulf. You know, lopsided, Mike, but there, and very heavy rain will then get dragged into North Florida by Thursday into Friday.
It's amazing how long we could be tracking this thing. Mark, thanks for that. And then we're going to talk about just how wet it could get for you in the southeast. And could you have some influence from Eta? Yeah, it's possible, but there's a big front that's coming through as well. The two may team up on you here in the southeast. Raleigh, you're 65 right now with mostly cloudy skies. Very warm temperatures today. In the 70s, we'll be in the mid-70s tomorrow, close to 80 degrees by a Tuesday. Remarkable how hot it is these days. And we stay in the 70s Wednesday and Thursday. Okay, as we go later in the week, this is our opportunity, I think, especially as we go like Thursday into Friday, that you might get some frontal moisture that could be, you know, pairing up with Eta. It all depends exactly how long Eta takes to get up into the southeast. But ultimately, you know, going into Friday, you'll have the front that pushes through. You'll cool down slightly. But you may begin to dry out then going close to the weekend. All right, so there's that high pressure that's directing a lot of that moisture right into the southeast here. Incredibly warm temperatures all the way into the northeast. You're going to see temperatures into the 70s at times this week. But you can see now how some heavy rain could really plague us here in a place like South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. A little bit of mountainous terrain here could enhance our flash flood risk here. Some spots 3 to 5 inches of rain. And we're pretty wet here already. We've had numerous systems over the course of the last few months, and some of them tropical systems that have really done us in here, but we really don't need any more rain. We could use some rain up into the northeast. We don't have a ton coming our way. The more dynamics are in the southeast, but ultimately going into Tuesday becomes a little bit more unsettled here. Going into Wednesday, now you see the front starting to take shape back through here. Out ahead of it, showers and thunderstorms now more prevalent. And then Thursday into Friday, here comes the front in full force now, and then pushing its way east as we go into Friday, where most of the concerns are going to be right at the beaches. All right, we've got a lot more to come for you tonight on the show, including live team coverage from South Florida, not only tonight, tomorrow morning as well with our team that's out there. Storm system about to go over the Keys for us tonight, might go right over Key Largo or Isla Mirada.
Your clothes get damaged when you...
From Eta bearing down on the Florida Keys tonight, with bands of gusty winds, heavy rain already affecting much of South Florida. And we have live team coverage for you, including a very erratic future track to watch in the days and even week ahead. Welcome into our special coverage. I'm Mike Bettis, and our storm specialist Mark Elliott joining us tonight to detail the track of this system, and meteorologist Mike Seidel in South Florida for us this evening. So we've got some breaking news to update you on. Lauderhill, Florida tonight. We've got water rescues taking place there because of the flash flooding, and Broward and Palm Beach counties in particular have been a hard hit this evening. Take a look at the images here. Look how deep this water is, waist deep here in Lauderhill. This is from the fire department there. But again, we urge you to not drive tonight in any of these areas where there is high water. We've got flash flood warnings right now in Broward and Palm Beach counties. Those warnings go until 11:45 tonight with, Mark, really heavy bands that have plagued us in both of those counties.
Yeah, that image is really telling. That was a water rescue crew trying to get someone out of a car that drove into a canal. And so you can drive yourself into an extremely dangerous situation tonight. 5 to 8 inches of rain already across the area, an additional 5 to 8, not out of the question, even in a reasonably short period of time. This is all as Tropical Storm Eta continues to approach the Keys tonight.